The June sun flooded the kitchen of my house on Meadowlark Lane with light, painting golden streaks across the worn linoleum floor. I was dusting the old sideboard, humming a tune I'd recently heard on the radio. It was unusually hot in Belmont, the kind of sticky, sweltering day that clung to your skin, and I kept wiping the sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. The air conditioner had long since needed replacing, but I kept putting off the purchase. It was simply too expensive for my modest retirement budget. The clock in the living room struck 2 o'clock. April had promised to come by at 3 o'clock to drop off the grandchildren for the weekend. Setting down the rag, I adjusted the knitted shawl on my shoulders and shuffled into the bathroom. My joints ached from the change in weather, but I had long learned to ignore such discomfort. 30 years as a nurse at the city hospital had taught me resilience, had trained me to keep going no matter what. On the kitchen table sat the shopping list I had written the night before. Gabrielle, though I still often slipped and called her April like I did when she was little, loved to criticize the contents of my refrigerator, so I always made sure to stock up before she arrived. At 14, Silas ate enough for 3, and 11-year-old Fallon had become as picky as her mother had been at that age. I opened the refrigerator and checked once more to ensure everything was in place. Milk, eggs, cheese, fresh fruit for the grandchildren. In the freezer, a baked turkey waited to be reheated. Gabrielle always said she never had time to cook because of work. Lately, though, she had been complaining a lot, especially about me. "Mom, you forgot to turn off the light in the bathroom again. Mom, why can't you learn to use a smartphone like normal people? Mom, you spoil Silas too much. He already has weight problems." Sometimes it felt as if I had become a source of constant irritation to her. But I kept quiet. After Garrett's death 5 years ago, Gabrielle and the children were all the family I had left. And I was raised to believe that family must be cherished, no matter the circumstance. The doorbell rang precisely at 3 o'clock. Punctuality was the one trait Gabrielle had inherited from her father. "Grandma!" Fallon rushed into the hallway, enveloping me in a swirl of children's shampoo and bubblegum. "My sweetheart," I murmured, hugging my granddaughter tightly, feeling a familiar warmth bloom in my chest. Silas followed behind, muttered a quiet hello, and immediately buried his face in his phone. At 14, he already seemed to think that affection was something unbecoming of a real man. Gabrielle entered last, arms full of bags, one large suitcase and several grocery sacks. "Mom, is the air conditioner broken again? I can't breathe in here," she said, brushing past me without so much as a greeting. "Hello, dear," I replied, smiling despite the sting. "Get changed. I've cooked turkey." "Hopefully not with too much oil," she replied sharply. "Silas already has a belly, and you keep feeding him fatty food." Silas blushed and buried his head even deeper into his phone. I felt a pang of sympathy for my grandson. Gabrielle had always been direct, but over the years her honesty had hardened into something blunter, something that seemed to cut without care. "Let's go to the kitchen. Everything's ready," I said, ignoring her remark. Over lunch, Gabrielle dominated the conversation with stories from her job at the insurance company, tales of ungrateful clients, micromanaging bosses, and incompetent co-workers. My grandchildren ate silently, occasionally answering my questions about school with one-word replies. After dinner, Silas asked to be excused to go to his room. That's what he called Gabrielle's old bedroom now, which had been refitted with a cot for his visits. "First, help your grandmother clear the table," Gabrielle instructed. I noticed how Silas's shoulders tensed. "It's okay. He can go. I'll manage," I offered gently. "That's exactly why he's growing up to be such a lazybones," Gabrielle snapped. "Everyone spoils him." "I'm not lazy," Silas mumbled, but he began clearing the plates anyway. When the table was done, the children retreated to their rooms. Fallon curled up with a book in the guest room, while Silas shut himself in his mother's old room. Gabrielle and I were left alone in the kitchen. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, pouring herself tea and sitting down across from me. Her tone sent a chill through me. She always used those words before saying something I wasn't going to like. "I'm listening, dear. I think it's time you started thinking about the future." She avoided my gaze, sipping her tea. "This house is too big for you to manage on your own. You can't keep up with the cleaning. You forget to turn off the lights, the stove." "I've never forgotten to turn off the stove," I said gently. "It doesn't matter," she replied with a dismissive wave. "The point is, you're 67, and we need to consider options." "Options?" I asked, though I knew where this was going. "Yes, living options. There are excellent nursing homes with medical care. You're a nurse. You know how important that kind of care is at your age." Something cold curled in my chest. "You want to send me to a nursing home?" "Not now, of course," she added quickly. "But we need to start thinking ahead. I can't keep worrying about you while I'm at work or running after the kids." "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I replied. My voice was calm, though inside I was shaking. "For now, maybe. But what about in a year? 5 years?" Gabrielle tapped her fingernails on the table, clearly frustrated. "I can't be torn between work, the kids, and you. I don't have time to drive here every day to check if you're okay." "I'm not asking you to. But you will." Her voice rose. "All old people end up being a burden on their children. I'm just trying to plan ahead." Burden. The word hit me harder than if she'd slapped me. I looked at Gabrielle and barely recognized the woman in front of me. The same girl I had taught to be kind, to be compassionate. "I'll never be a burden to you," I said quietly. "Don't worry about it, Mom. Don't be upset," she said, softening a little when she saw my face. "I just want you to be safe. You'll be better off in a nice nursing home than all alone here." "I'll think about what you said," I replied, standing up. "I'll go check on Fallon." We didn't return to the subject that evening. We watched television, played board games with the children, and when everyone had gone to bed, I stayed behind in the kitchen, staring into the darkness outside the window. That word, burden, echoed in my mind, refusing to let me sleep. Could it be that my only daughter saw me not as her mother, but as a problem to be solved? I thought of all the years I had raised her alone after Garrett died. I remembered teaching her how to walk, how I read her fairy tales night after night, how I held her hand through her divorce from Dexter. I had given Gabrielle everything I had, my time, my strength, my love. And now, she wanted to send me away to live out my days in some institution. The next morning, when I came downstairs, Gabrielle was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. An omelet sizzled on the stove and the toaster popped up 2 golden slices of toast. "Good morning, Mom," she said cheerfully, as if yesterday's conversation had never happened. "Did you sleep well?" "Not very," I replied honestly. "There's that back again. I told you, you need an orthopedic mattress. That one's 100 years old." "It's not the mattress, Gabrielle." She sighed and set the omelet on the plate. "If you're still thinking about yesterday, you're wasting your time. I'm just looking out for your future." "By calling me a burden?" "That's not what I meant. You're exaggerating." She rolled her eyes like she used to as a teenager. "I said old people can become burdens. That's just a fact. But we can plan things now so it doesn't come to that. By sending me to a nursing home." "Why are you so hung up on words?" She slammed the frying pan into the sink. "It was just a suggestion. You don't have to turn it into a tragedy." Before I could respond, the grandchildren came padding into the kitchen, yawning and rubbing their eyes. The conversation paused. At breakfast, Gabrielle talked about the day's plans. Maybe a trip to the mall, a movie, the park if the weather held. "Is Grandma coming with us?" Fallon asked, spooning cereal into her mouth. "Grandma's back hurts. She should rest, Gabrielle answered before I could speak. Actually, I'd love to come, I said. My back's fine. Really? Fallon beamed. Mom, there's going to be a lot of walking, Gabrielle said, her tone firm. You'll get tired. I used to be an ER nurse, honey. Trust me, I know my limits. As Gabrielle helped the children get dressed, there was a knock at the door. Standing there, in all her usual brightness, was Winnie Claflin, my neighbor and dear friend of the past 15 years. Good morning, sunshine, she chirped as she breezed in. Winnie always looked ready for a celebration. Bright lipstick, silver hair curled in soft waves, rings sparkling on every finger. Oh, I see the whole family's here. Hello, Mrs. Claflin, Gabrielle said politely, but I noticed the way her shoulders stiffened. She had never liked Winnie, always found her too eccentric. Winnie, would you like some coffee? I offered, knowing full well she'd never say no. I'd love some, dear, and maybe a slice of that heavenly cake I know you're hiding somewhere. We settled onto the porch with coffee and cake while Gabrielle and the kids got ready to head to the mall. We're leaving, Gabrielle called from the door. We'll be back for dinner. Okay, have a good day, I said, waving to my grandchildren as they piled into the car. When Gabrielle's car disappeared around the corner, Winnie turned to me with a frown. All right, what's going on? You look like you've swallowed a lemon. I sighed. Winnie always saw right through me. Gabrielle thinks it's time I moved into a nursing home. What? Winnie nearly choked on her coffee. Is she out of her mind? You're in better shape than half our neighbors, and most of them are 20 years younger. She says she's just worried about me, I murmured, but even as I said it, I felt the sting return. Winnie scoffed. Worried, my foot. Don't let anyone put you on a shelf before your time, sweetheart. You've still got too much life in you. And as the morning sun glinted off Winnie's earrings, I found myself clinging to those words like a lifeline. I opened the envelope slowly, feeling a strange mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The handwriting on the folded paper was unmistakably Garrett's, firm, slightly slanted, and intimately familiar. My hands trembled as I unfolded the note, its edges yellowed slightly with age. Meredith, it began simply, if you're reading this, then I guess I'm not around anymore. I never was much good at talking about feelings, you know that. But I needed to say this, even if it's only on paper. I loved you, from the day I saw you in that hospital cafeteria to the very end. I know I didn't always make it easy. I messed up a lot, let stress and silence get in the way of joy. But you gave me a home, a life, and a daughter we both adored. Thank you for that. I had to sit down. My knees buckled slightly, and I perched on the old stool beside the workbench. Garrett's words weren't elaborate, but they cut straight through the years. I hope you're reading this when you're old and gray and still bossing people around like you always did, the note continued. But if you're reading it and you're alone, wondering what to do with your life, don't let this house become your prison. It's a house, Mare, not a mausoleum. Live. Travel. Take pictures like you always wanted. You put so much of yourself into caring for us, for everyone else. Maybe it's time to do something just for you. The last line was scribbled hastily, like an afterthought, but it undid me. You still have time. Don't waste it. Tears slid down my cheeks as I folded the letter and held it to my chest. For so long, I had let the weight of memory and duty keep me in place. But Garrett, my Garrett, had known even then that this day might come. That I would need permission. And now I had it. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The air felt different, lighter, freer. I made a strong cup of coffee, sat by the window in the kitchen, and watched the sun rise over the garden. The for sale sign was already planted in the lawn, a bold declaration that change was coming. And instead of feeling dread, I felt purpose. Over the following days, I continued packing. I tackled one room at a time, sorting through belongings with a discerning eye. Sentimentality has its place, but I had learned to let go. I kept only what mattered: the wedding album, Garrett's letter, a few framed photographs, and a worn scarf Brie had knitted me in high school. Everything else, furniture, dishes, excess linens, was either donated or listed online. I made peace with the past, one box at a time. Gabrielle called twice during that week. The first time, her tone was sharp and uncertain. "Mom, are you sure about this? I mean, it all feels very sudden." I reassured her that it wasn't sudden, not really. It had been building for years beneath the surface. She sighed. "Well, if you need help." "I don't," I said gently. "But thank you." The second time she called, her voice was softer. "Fallon told me you gave her that little porcelain rabbit from your bedroom. She's been carrying it around everywhere." That made me smile. It was hers once. I was just giving it back. Fallon came over one afternoon, shy and quiet as ever. I let her choose a few books from my shelf and gave her a scarf I hadn't worn in years but knew she'd love. "Are you really leaving, Grandma?" she asked, hugging me tight. I nodded. "But I'll still be around. Just in a different place." I hadn't told anyone yet where I planned to go, mostly because I didn't fully know myself. But I had some ideas. I'd been looking at apartments in a nearby town, not too far from Belmont, but far enough to feel new. And I'd dusted off my old dream, the one I'd shelved so long ago I almost forgot it was mine. Photography. The camera had been long gone, but that didn't stop me. I visited a little shop downtown run by a kindly man named Eric who walked me through the options with the patience of a saint. I left with a digital camera and a spark I hadn't felt in decades. I began taking walks, capturing the way sunlight filtered through trees, the curve of a wrought iron gate, the quiet dignity in elderly faces waiting at the bus stop. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a way of seeing the world again. Offers on the house came quickly, just as Lane had predicted. Young couples and families toured it with wide eyes and whispered dreams. One couple stood in the garden and spoke in hushed tones about planting vegetables and raising a baby in the room that used to be a breeze. I liked them immediately. When the final offer came in, Lane called me with excitement in her voice. "It's a good one, Meredith. More than we hoped for." I accepted without hesitation. The paperwork was signed within days. Moving day came faster than I anticipated. I stood on the porch one last time, taking in the familiar scent of lilac bushes Garrett had planted, the creak of the swing Brie used to squeal on as a child, and the way the sunlight fell across the faded welcome mat. 40 years of life, laughter, and loss. But also 40 years of strength and resilience. I didn't cry as I locked the door behind me. I simply whispered, "Thank you," and walked away. My new apartment was modest, clean, and filled with light. No creaky floors or crowded closets, just space. Space to think, to move, to be. The first photo I hung on the wall was one I had taken myself, a close-up of a dandelion, delicate and wild, its seeds caught mid-flight. It felt symbolic. In the weeks that followed, I enrolled in a photography class at the community center, joined a book club, and even started volunteering at the animal shelter. Each morning brought the promise of something new. I wasn't anyone's burden anymore. I was just Meredith, alive, free, and finally choosing her own story. One Sunday afternoon, while sorting through pictures for a small photography exhibit the center was hosting, I came across an image I had taken recently, a shot of a little girl in the park, barefoot and laughing as bubbles floated around her. It was joy, pure and unfiltered. And for the first time in a long while, I felt that joy inside me too. Later that evening, Gabrielle called. Her voice was tentative, almost apologetic. "I miss you, Mom," she said. "The kids miss you too." "I miss you all as well," I said, meaning it. "You sound happy." There was a long pause on the line, then, "Maybe next weekend, the kids and I can come visit?" "I'd like that." After we hung up, I stepped out onto my small balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. I lifted my camera and took a picture. A new memory. A new beginning. It was Garrett's handwriting, so familiar, so dear to me. "Dear Meredith," he wrote, "if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here. I know you are a strong woman, but I am afraid that after I am gone, you will withdraw into yourself and devote your entire life to caring for Aubrey and your grandchildren. Don't do that, my love. Live your life to the fullest. Travel. Take pictures of the world like you've always dreamed of doing. Don't let our daughter dictate how you live your life. She loves you, but she has her own path to follow, and you must have yours. Know that I will always love you, wherever I am. Your Garrett." Tears streamed down my cheeks, dripping onto the paper. He knew me so well, better than I knew myself. How I wished he were here now, standing beside me, supporting me in my decision. Wiping my eyes, I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into its envelope, then placed it alongside other important documents in the bag I intended to take with me. I made a quiet, firm decision to donate Garrett's belongings to the local church, which regularly collected clothes for the poor. The next few days were filled with a flurry of motion. I sorted through his things with a steady rhythm, discarding what I didn't need and packing what I would take. I called Aubrey only once, explaining I was busy cleaning and not to worry if she couldn't reach me. As usual, my daughter, wrapped up in her own busy world, replied distractedly that she'd try calling over the weekend. On the third day after the realtor's visit, the phone rang. It was Lane. "Mrs. Tramble, I have great news," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "We already have several offers. One of them is even higher than our asking price. It's a family of 3 with a school-aged child. They fell in love with the house at first sight and are ready to put down a deposit today." I felt my heart skip a beat. Everything was moving so quickly. So soon was all I could manage. "Yes, it's not usual," Lane said, "but houses like yours are in high demand right now. The buyers are ready to get a mortgage and close the deal as soon as possible. Are you still interested in selling quickly?" I took a long, grounding breath. The moment of truth had arrived, sooner than I'd expected. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to sell the house." "Great," Lane responded. "I'll contact the buyers and schedule an appointment to sign the preliminary contract. Have you found a new place to live yet?" Her question caught me off guard. Amid all the sorting and decisions, I had somehow overlooked the most basic need. I needed a place to go. "Not yet," I admitted, "but I'd like to find a small apartment, maybe closer to the city center." "I have a few options in mind," Lane replied. "Nothing fancy, but clean, cozy apartments in good neighborhoods. Would you like me to send you the information?" "Yes, please," I said gratefully. I smiled. "I am." "And one more thing, Mrs. Tramble," she added. "The buyers would like to move in as soon as possible. They're asking if you could vacate in 2 to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks. So little time to say goodbye to the home where I had lived almost my entire life." "I'll do my best," I told her quietly. After the call, I sat down at the computer, an older model I had bought a few years ago at Abby's insistence. My daughter thought I should keep up with technology. I rarely used it, mostly for emails or reading the news. But now it served a purpose. I opened a browser and typed Belmont photography courses into the search bar. To my surprise, several results appeared. One in particular caught my eye: Objective Photography School, located near the city center. It offered beginner courses twice a week, including lectures and practical fieldwork. The tuition was reasonable, especially considering the amount I was about to receive for the house. Without hesitation, I called the number on the website and enrolled in the course, which would begin in 2 weeks. Then I turned my attention to the apartment listings Lane had sent me. 2 stood out, one in an old brick building overlooking the city park, and another in a modern complex with an elevator and security. I called Lane and scheduled viewings for both the next day. Then, grabbing another empty box, I climbed into the attic, the final space in the house that needed sorting. It was packed with forgotten items, Christmas decorations, old suitcases, unused skis, and other remnants of life with Garrett that we could never quite bring ourselves to throw away. I sorted everything methodically, discarding what was no longer useful and setting aside a small pile of keepsakes. In one box, I discovered over 20 old photo albums, images I had captured over the years. April taking her first steps. Garrett and I on a trip to the lake. Our first house before we moved to Belmont. I had forgotten how deeply I once loved photography, before life crowded it out. I carried the albums downstairs and placed them on the coffee table. Let this be my legacy to a Bill, I thought. Not a house or inheritance, but real, genuine memories captured on film. The next day, Lane and I visited the apartments. The one in the old brick building was dark and noisy, its windows facing a busy street. But the second, in the modern complex, captivated me instantly. It was a bright one-room apartment on the 4th floor, with large windows, a small balcony, a new kitchen, and, thankfully for my knees, an elevator. It was smaller than what I was used to, but more than enough for me. "Take it. You won't regret it," Lane said, watching my expression. "The neighborhood is great. There's a park nearby, a supermarket 2 blocks away, and a bus stop just 5 minutes away. The neighbors are mostly middle-aged professionals, quiet folks." "I agree," I nodded. "When can I move in?" "It's available now. You can sign the lease today." We returned to Lane's office, where I signed the lease and paid the first month's rent and security deposit. I had a new roof over my head. The next day, I met the buyers, a young couple with an 8-year-old boy, to sign the preliminary contract. They seemed kind and respectful, and I was relieved the house would go to a family with a child. The boy, with tousled blonde hair and bright eyes, reminded me of Silas at that age, before adolescence had pulled him inward. After signing the documents and receiving the deposit, I returned home and sank into the living room sofa. It was done. In 2 weeks, the house would belong to someone else, and I would begin a new chapter. Strangely, I felt no sorrow, only relief and a quiet excitement about the unknown ahead. I picked up my phone and called Vinny. She had to be the first to know. "Hi, sweetie," she answered in her usual cheerful tone. "How are you?" "I'm selling the house," I blurted. "And I've already found an apartment downtown." There was a beat of silence, then laughter. "Meredith Tramble," she said, her voice full of delight. "You never cease to amaze me. I thought you'd spend months thinking it over. You've already made up your mind? Way to go, girl. I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I said, smiling. "But that's not all. I signed up for photography classes." "Photography?" she asked, surprised. "I didn't know you were into that." "A long time ago," I said softly, thinking of Garrett's wedding gift and his last letter. "It's time to make up for lost time." The days that followed were spent preparing for the move. I hired movers, bought boxes, and arranged with the church to donate furniture and clothing. Each day, the house felt less like mine. A week before the closing, I had moved most of my belongings to the new apartment. It was smaller, yes, but everything I brought with me held deep personal meaning. On the final morning, I rose early. Only a few items remained: my bed, some dishes, and a small selection of clothes. I walked through each empty room, whispering my goodbyes. There was the corner where Abby's crib once stood. There was where Garrett had surprised me on our 20th anniversary. There was where I had wept upon learning of my mother's passing. So many moments, so much life, now quietly tucked into the bones of this house. And yet, I wasn't sad. I felt lighter, as if shedding a weight I had carried too long. At the appointed time, I met Lane and the buyers at the notary's office. We exchanged greetings, and the paperwork began. I signed away ownership of the house I had loved for 40 years. When it was done, I received a check that felt unreal in its size and handed over the keys. The young boy looked up at me with curiosity. "Are there any ghosts in the house?" he asked. I smiled. "No. Only good memories." His mother squeezed his hand and smiled. "We'll take good care of your house, Mrs. Tramble." "It's your house now," I said, "and I hope you'll be happy there." Outside the office, I took a deep breath. It was done. The house was sold, and a new apartment awaited. My photography classes would begin in a week. I got into a taxi and gave the driver my new address. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I looked ahead, toward where my new life was beginning. The first week in my new apartment passed quickly. I unpacked, arranged my things, hung curtains, and learned the rhythm of my new space. It was smaller, yes, but cozy and bright. The large windows flooded the room with sunlight, and the little balcony offered a view of the park. Each morning, I sipped coffee while watching joggers and mothers with strollers below. The city pulsed with life, and I was slowly becoming part of it. I waited for April to call, but the phone remained silent. She was busy with work and her children. I wasn't in a hurry to tell her about the move. Let things unfold naturally. Eventually she would know, but by then I would be settled, stronger. On Thursday, my photography classes began. Objective Photography School was housed in an old brick building repurposed into art studios. I arrived early, nerves fluttering in my chest like a schoolgirl. I hadn't taken a class in 2 decades, not since the mandatory nursing refreshers. The classroom filled with people of all ages. I took a seat in the middle row and opened my notebook. "May I sit down?" a pleasant male voice asked. I looked up to see a tall, gray-haired man with a warm smile. "Of course," I said, moving my bag. "Thank you." "I'm Quentin Hamish," he said, extending his hand. "Meredith Tramble," I replied. We shook hands. "Is this your first photography class?" he asked. "Yes. And you?" "Oh, I'm an old hand at this," he chuckled. "Been shooting for 30 years. But technology changes, and you've got to keep your creative eye fresh." Our conversation was cut short by the arrival of our instructor, a petite woman with short hair and bright, intelligent eyes. "Good evening, everyone," she greeted us energetically. "I'm Heather Oren, your instructor. I've been a professional photographer for 20 years. She explained the course structure, showed us examples of past student work, and listed the equipment we'd need. I made a mental note. I'd need to buy a camera. After the lecture, we introduced ourselves. When it was my turn, I felt my cheeks flush slightly. "My name is Meredith Tramble. I'm 67. I'm a retired nurse. I used to love photography when I was young, but life got busy. Family, work, responsibilities. Recently, I decided to begin a new chapter and return to an old passion." And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who were all starting something new, I felt something unfamiliar, a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. "That's a great story, Meredith," Heather said with a warm smile. "It's never too late to return to something you love. Do you already have a camera?" "Not yet," I admitted, feeling a bit sheepish. "But I plan to buy one in the next few days." "Don't rush into it," she advised gently. "In our next class, we'll talk about choosing the right camera. In the meantime, you can use your smartphone. Modern phones have excellent cameras that are perfectly suitable for beginners." After class, Quentin suggested we stop by a small cafe across from the photography school. We were joined by 2 other women from the class, Roa Swig, a librarian in her 60s, and Beatrice Christian, a recently retired elementary school teacher. Over steaming cups of tea and the mellow hum of cafe chatter, we began discussing our expectations for the course and sharing little pieces of our lives. "How long have you been in Belmont?" Roa asked. "Almost 40 years," I replied. I recently moved downtown, but before that, I lived in the Green Valley area. Green Valley. Beatrix perked up. My niece just bought a house there last week, on Meadowlark Lane. It's so beautiful, with a big garden. I froze, my teacup halfway to my lips. Could it be the same house? Meadowlark Lane, you say? I asked cautiously. Do you happen to remember the house number? I think it was 23. Beatrix furrowed her brow, searching her memory. Yes, that's right, 23. They were so happy with the purchase. The previous owner, an elderly woman, was selling it urgently. Below market value. Not that much below, I blurted out before I could stop myself. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, curious and surprised. Do you know that house? Roa asked. I set my cup down and smiled. I'm the elderly woman who sold it. You? Beatrix's eyes widened. What a coincidence. Carolyn is my niece. She absolutely loves the house. She says it has good energy. I'm glad to hear that, I said sincerely. I lived a happy life there. I hope your niece and her family will be just as happy. But why did you decide to sell such a beautiful house? Roa asked gently, clearly intrigued. I didn't want to dive into the painful details about my strained relationship with Aubrey, so I gave a polite, evasive answer. It became too big for me to live in alone. Besides, I've always dreamed of living closer to the center, being able to walk to shops, museums, and parks. At my age, you begin to appreciate time and opportunity in a new way. I understand you perfectly, Quentin nodded. After my wife died, I also sold our big house and moved into an apartment near the river. It was the best decision of my life. No worries about the lawn, the roof, or the pipes. Just freedom and new experiences. The conversation drifted to other topics, but I caught Beatrix discreetly pulling out her phone to send a message, likely to her niece, telling her about our chance meeting. I smiled inwardly. Belmont was a small town. Rumors had wings. Sooner or later, word would reach Aubrey. At our next class, Heather gave a lecture on choosing a camera for beginners. Afterward, I approached her for advice. She kindly recommended several models in the mid-price range. Quentin, who had overheard our conversation, stepped in. I'm running out of film anyway, he said. We can go to the camera store together, and I can explain what to look for better than any salesperson. I agreed, and on Saturday, we met in the city center. Quentin proved to be a genuine expert. Patiently, he walked me through the differences between models, helped me compare features, and let me handle various cameras to see which felt best in my hands. Eventually, I chose a medium-sized SLR camera with a good zoom lens. Great choice for a beginner, he approved. It's fairly easy to use but gives you room to grow. Once you get the hang of it, you can experiment with different lenses. After our visit to the store, we went to a nearby cafe. Over coffee, Quentin invited me to join a photo walk he was organizing the next day. Several folks from our class have already agreed to come, he said. We're heading to the national park to practice landscape photography. It's a great chance to try out your new camera. I gladly accepted. It had been so long since I'd gone beyond the city limits, especially in the company of like-minded people. On Sunday morning, we met in the parking lot of the photography school. Besides Quentin, there were Roa, Beatrix, and 2 other classmates, a young couple named Zach and Mia. Quentin drove a minivan that comfortably fit us all, and we headed out to the park, about an hour's drive away. The day was sunny and clear, perfect for photography. We wandered along forest paths, paused at sunlit glades, and climbed to a ridge that offered a breathtaking view of the lake. The experienced photographers shared tips with the beginners, helping us with camera settings, framing, and lighting. I felt a quiet joy as I moved among the trees with my new camera, capturing sunbeams dancing on water, trying to freeze a bird mid-flight, or zooming in on dewdrops balancing on delicate leaves. The world looked different through the lens, brighter, more vivid, and somehow more meaningful. I was beginning to see beauty in the little things I had once rushed past. At lunchtime, we had a picnic by the lake shore. Everyone had brought something to share. Beatrice baked a rich blueberry pie, Roa brought hearty sandwiches, and Zach and Mia offered fresh fruit and homemade lemonade. I hadn't known about the tradition, so I brought nothing. Quentin noticed my awkwardness and leaned in. "Don't worry," he said. "You can bring something next time." "Will there be a next time?" I asked, smiling. "Of course," he winked. "We try to get out every weekend. Sometimes the park, sometimes the city for street shots, sometimes the coast. Photography is practice, practice, and more practice." After lunch, we continued shooting until the light softened and the sky began to shift toward dusk. We packed up and headed back to the city. When I got home, exhausted but content, I uploaded the images from my memory card and began browsing through them. Most weren't great. Some were blurry, others poorly framed, but a few made me smile. One shot in particular, a gnarled old tree bathed in the golden light of sunset, made my heart swell with quiet pride. Garrett would have been proud of me. I was finally doing something I had long dreamed of but never found time to pursue. That's when I noticed my phone flashing red with missed calls. 15 from Aubrey. 3 voicemails. The news had traveled faster than I'd expected. I pressed play on the first message. My daughter's voice crackled with urgency. "Mom, is it true that you sold the house? Daisy just called and said new people have moved into the house on Meadowlark Lane. Call me back right away." The second message came an hour later. "Mom, where are you? I've been calling all day. I went to the house and strangers are living there. They said they bought it a week ago. What's going on? Where are you?" The third message, just 30 minutes earlier, was panicked. "Mom, I'm really worried. If you don't call me back within the next hour, I'm calling the police. Please let me know you're okay." I sighed and dialed her number. She answered immediately. "Mom, finally. Where are you? What's going on?" "Hello, Aubrey," I said calmly. "I'm fine. I sold the house and moved into an apartment in the city center." "You what?" Her voice was filled with disbelief. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I was going to," I said honestly. "But you were busy, and I wanted to settle in first." "I can't believe it," she exclaimed. "You sold the house, our family home, and didn't even consult me." "Should I have?" I asked gently. "The house belonged to me. The decision was mine. But it's our house. It's where we grew up. All our memories are there. How could you do that?" "My memories will stay with me wherever I live," I said. "And now the house belongs to a lovely young family with a child. I think your father would have liked that. Don't bring Dad into this. He would never have approved of something so irresponsible. Where are you going to live now?" "I already told you. An apartment downtown. It's small but cozy, with a balcony and a view of the park." "An apartment?" she echoed incredulously. "You've never lived in one. You don't know what it's like to live in a multi-family building with neighbors on all sides, no garden." "You can learn anything," I replied, still calm. "Today I learned how to photograph nature. By the way, I signed up for photography classes." "Photography?" she asked, confused. "Mom, what is going on with you? You're selling the house, moving into an apartment, signing up for classes. Is this because of that conversation we had? About the nursing home?" "Not just that," I answered honestly. "But yes, it was the last straw. You were right about one thing. It was time for me to think about the future. And I did. I sold the house that was too big, bought a comfortable apartment, enrolled in classes I always wanted to take, and even made new friends. Friends? Yes. From my photography class. Today we went to the national park and took pictures. It was lovely. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her trying to make sense of it all. I just don't understand, she finally said. Why didn't you talk to me first? We could have figured something out. What exactly, Aubrey? You wanted me to sell the house and move into a nursing home so I wouldn't be a burden. Instead, I sold the house and moved into a place where I can live independently and do what I enjoy. The only difference is, I made the decision, not you. I never said you had to move into a home right now, she exclaimed. I just thought we should consider the future. And I did, I said softly. I made the choice that's right for me. Mom. Her voice trembled. Do you even realize how this looks? Like you're punishing me, cutting me out of the inheritance or something. That stunned me. Did she really think this was about money? Honey, I said gently, I didn't take away your inheritance. The money from the sale is still there. I used some to buy the apartment and pay for my classes, but most of it's in the bank. When the time comes, you and your children will get it. It's not about the money, she replied quickly, but I caught the note of relief in her voice. It's about you making such a huge decision without even consulting me. I'm your daughter. I'm your family. We should make these decisions together, Aubrey said, her voice tight with emotion. No, Aubrey, I replied firmly. I love you. You're my daughter. But I'm an adult, and I have the right to make my own decisions, just like you make decisions about your life without consulting me. That's different, she insisted stubbornly. Why? I asked. Because I'm older? Because you think I'm not capable of deciding how to live my life? No. But, she hesitated. I'm just worried about you. You've lived in that house your whole life, and now you've suddenly decided to change everything. It's not like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do, I replied gently. People change, Aubrey. Even at my age. Silence fell over the line. I could hear her breathing heavily, likely frowning as she mulled over my words. Then, finally, she spoke. I want to see your new apartment, she said, to make sure you're okay. Of course, I agreed, a smile in my voice. Come over next weekend. I'll cook dinner, show you around, tell you about my classes. Bring the kids if you want. It's a little cramped, but there's always room for the grandchildren. Okay, Aubrey replied dryly. Saturday at 2. And Mom, next time, please let me know about such serious decisions in advance. I almost lost my mind when I found out you sold the house. I'll try, I promised, though in truth, I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. My new life was just beginning, and I didn't yet know where it would take me. After our conversation, I returned to my computer and resumed browsing through the photos from my trip earlier that day. One image in particular caught my eye, a panoramic shot of a lake with distant mountains crowned by light. The composition, the colors, the serenity, it was perfect. I decided to print it and hang it on the wall. It would be the first trophy of my new life. That night, lying in bed, I thought about everything. The walk through the park, my budding friendships, the call with my daughter. It felt as though I had finally awakened after a long slumber, as if I'd been living someone else's life all along. And now, for the first time, I was finally writing my own story. With that thought, I drifted to sleep, clutching my new camera like a precious treasure beside my pillow. In the morning, the phone rang. It was Vinny, of course. Meredith Tramble, she exclaimed in her usual ringing tone. You sold the house and didn't tell me? I had to hear about it from Betty on Pine Street. I'm sorry, Vinny, I said with a chuckle, picturing her indignant expression. It all happened so fast. I was going to invite you to a housewarming party once I got settled in. So that's why you weren't answering your door. I thought you were mad at me for that advice I gave you. On the contrary, I followed your advice. And you know what? It was the best decision of my life. Tell me everything, Vinny demanded. Where do you live? How did your princess daughter react? And what are you doing now that you're finally free? I told her everything, about the new apartment, the photography classes, the park, my talk with Gabrielle. She listened intently, interjecting with her usual enthusiastic well done, and you go girl. I'm so proud of you, dear, she said when I finished. Not everyone has the courage to change everything at our age. Most people just drift quietly toward the end. But not you. You're blazing a path. Thank you, Vinny, I replied sincerely. Your support means the world to me. So, she said with a playful tone, when can I see your new place? And meet your photographer friends, especially that Quentin you were raving about. I wasn't raving, I began, but then stopped. Vinny was teasing me. April's coming with the kids on Saturday. Why don't you come over Sunday? I'll make your favorite blueberry pie. I'd love to, Vinny said. And don't forget to show me your photos. I want to see what this class has taught you. After our call, I got dressed and stepped out onto the balcony with a warm cup of coffee. The morning was clear. In the park below, joggers and dog walkers were already starting their day. Life was bustling, and, for the first time in a long time, I felt like part of it. Not just a spectator, but an active participant. I thought about Aubrey's upcoming visit. I knew it wouldn't be easy to make her understand why I'd made the decisions I had, but in the end, it was my life. I had every right to live it the way I saw fit, even if others didn't agree. Saturday arrived, sunny and warm. I woke early to prepare lunch for Aubrey and the children. I wanted them to see I was doing well on my own. I tidied the apartment, placed fresh flowers in vases, and hung some of my best photos on the living room wall. In just 2 weeks, the apartment had begun to feel like home. Every corner now bore my touch. I had rearranged the furniture, brought my favorite curtains from the old house, and made the tiny kitchen work for me. It was cozy, bright, and just enough. By noon, everything was ready. The roast was tenderly simmering in the oven. The salad was chilling in the fridge. The apple pie I'd baked early that morning filled the air with warm notes of cinnamon and vanilla. I put on my best dress, the dark blue one with the tiny floral print that Garrett used to call royal. I styled my hair and even applied a touch of makeup, something I hadn't done in years. At exactly 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. "Mom, it's us," came Aubrey's voice from the speaker. "Which button is the doorbell?" "The third one on the right," I replied. "Come up to the 4th floor. Apartment 412. Moments later, there was a knock. I opened the door to see Aubrey standing there with Silas and Fallon. My daughter's face was tense, lips pursed and eyes alert. My grandchildren, on the other hand, looked wide-eyed with curiosity. "Grandma!" Fallon exclaimed, throwing her arms around my neck. "You have a new house." "It's an apartment, sweetheart," I laughed, hugging her close. "Come in. Don't just stand in the hallway." Silas nodded, muttered a shy hello, and walked inside with teenage indifference, though I could see curiosity flickering in his eyes. Aubrey followed behind, glancing around. "Hi, Mom," she said dryly. "Interesting place." "Thank you," I said, brushing off her tone. "I really like it here. Make yourselves comfortable. Dinner's almost ready." Aubrey made a slow, silent circuit of the apartment. She peeked into the kitchen, then the bedroom, then the bathroom. Her face was unreadable, but I could tell she was searching for flaws, for proof she was right. It's pretty cramped, she said finally, returning to the living room. And noisy, I bet. The windows face the park, I corrected gently. And I like watching life go by. Silence can be too quiet sometimes. Grandma, what are these photos? Fallon asked, pointing to the framed prints on the wall. I took them, I replied, beaming. In my photography class. You? She gasped. By yourself? They're so beautiful. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, brushing her hair back. If you'd like, I can show you how to use the camera after lunch. Fallon nodded enthusiastically, and to my delight, even Silas looked up from his phone. What kind of camera do you have, Grandma? I told him the make and model. His eyes widened. Seriously? That's a professional DSLR? Where did you learn to use that? At the class, I repeated proudly. And with help from my friends in the photography club. We have a wonderful teacher named Heather and Quentin. He's a former architect who's been taking pictures for over 30 years. He's been great with beginners. Quentin, Aubrey interjected, raising an eyebrow. Who's that? A friend from the photography class, I said simply. He takes us on photo walks on weekends. He's a very interesting man. Aubrey hummed but said nothing more. I ushered everyone to the dining table, and the conversation shifted to safer ground. School updates, the weather, a new movie the kids had watched. I spoke about my classes, my progress, and the joys of city living. The tension gradually eased. Even Aubrey began to soften. She complimented the roast. Fallon ate 2 slices of pie, declaring it the most delicious in the world. After lunch, the kids wandered off to explore the balcony. Aubrey and I remained at the table. So, she began, turning her teacup in her hands, you really sold the house? Yes, I nodded. The papers are signed. The money's in the bank. The new owners have already moved in. And you're not going back? No. I live here now. She drew a long breath, like she was steeling herself. Mom, I have something to tell you. I was planning to move into the house, with the kids, in a few years. I blinked. Really? You never told me that. I thought it was obvious, she said with a shrug. The house is big, the neighborhood is nice, great schools. Dexter and I are divorced. I figured when the kids were older, we'd move in together. You, me, Silas, Fallon. A family. But you talked about a nursing home, I reminded her, baffled. That was years off. Aubrey exclaimed. 10, 15 years maybe, when you started needing help. Until then, we could have lived together. You'd help with the kids, and I'd help with the house. I was quiet, trying to absorb her words. In recent years, all she'd spoken about were her cramped apartment, the rent, the chaos of single motherhood. Not once had she mentioned this plan. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. I thought you knew, she said softly, not meeting my eyes. And besides, I didn't want to pressure you. It was your house, your choice. Then why mention me being a burden? A nursing home. That's not what I meant, she protested. I just wanted us to talk about the future. But you misunderstood and just did this. She gestured around the apartment. I studied her. There was genuine concern in her eyes, but also resentment, and maybe even disappointment. You know, Aubrey, I said slowly, even if you'd told me, I'm not sure I would have agreed. We're very different. We have different lifestyles, expectations, routines. You'd want me to help with the kids. And I want to enjoy the freedom I've earned. Freedom from what? She asked, her voice tight. From your family? Not from my family. From obligation, I clarified. I've spent my life living for others. My parents, your father, you. I don't regret it. But now that I have the chance to live for myself, I want to take it. So that's why you sold the house, she said bitterly. The house where we could have lived together. I sold the house because it was too big for me, I answered gently, and because I wanted to start a new chapter. Without regret. Without resentment. Aubrey looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe to her, I'd always just been Mom, not a woman with her own dreams, her own right to joy. So it's over, she said quietly. The house is gone. We'll never live together. The house is gone, I agreed. But we're still family. You'll raise your children and build your career. And I smiled. I'll learn photography. Make new friends. Like Quentin, she said pointedly. Yes, I replied, not rising to the bait. Even Quentin. At my age, it's rare to find people who share your passions. Aubrey seemed on the verge of replying, but at that moment, Fallon burst into the room. Grandma! You promised to show me how to use the camera. I stood up and smiled. Yes, dear. Let's get started. And just like that, the new chapter continued. Of course, sweetie, I said, rising from the table, grateful for a chance to interrupt the uncomfortable conversation. I'll get the camera right now. The rest of the day unfolded more peacefully than I'd dared to hope. I showed my grandchildren how to use the camera, explaining the basics of composition, lighting, and angles. Even Silas, usually aloof and disinterested, began to show genuine curiosity. We spent the afternoon in the park having a little photo shoot, capturing candid moments in the golden light. Gabriel kept her distance, watching us with a hardened expression, her arms folded as if she were protecting herself from the warmth she saw around her. When it came time to say goodbye, Fallon hugged me tightly. I like your new apartment, Grandma, and the photos. Can I come visit next weekend? Will you teach me some more? Of course, sweetheart, I said, stroking her hair gently. Come whenever you want. You're always welcome here. Silas shook my hand in an awkward but sincere gesture, and I saw something shift in his eyes, a spark of interest that hadn't been there before. Thanks for the lesson, Grandma. I'll download that photo editing app you mentioned. Gabriel said goodbye curtly, but her tone lacked the sharpness it usually held. When I hugged her, she didn't pull away. That small act alone felt like a step forward. After they left, I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and settled into my armchair by the window, gazing out at the evening park below. The visit had gone better than I expected, but Gabriel's words about the house still echoed in my mind. Her veiled resentment, her unspoken expectations, it all lingered uncomfortably. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. It was Quentin, reminding me of our photo outing to the botanical garden scheduled for the next day. How did the meeting with your daughter go? He asked after greeting me. Better than I feared. Worse than I hoped, I replied truthfully. The grandchildren loved the camera. I hesitated, then added, Quentin, it turns out Gabriel was planning to move into my house with her children in a few years. She expected we'd live together again. Quentin paused, surprised. That's quite an assumption. These days, 3 generations under one roof is rare, especially among adults with established routines. That's exactly how I feel, I sighed. But Gabriel thinks I betrayed the family by selling the house, as if bricks and tiles are more sacred than people. Give her time, Quentin advised gently. She needs to understand that her mother is her own person, with plans and desires that don't have to be dictated by anyone else. The next morning, I was awakened by the doorbell's sharp insistence. I glanced at the clock, 8 a.m. Far too early for visitors. I threw on my robe and shuffled to the door. Who is it? I called. It's me. Open up, came Gabriel's voice. Surprised, I opened the door. She stood alone, without the children. Her face looked drawn and sleepless, a hollow tension in her features. April, what's wrong? Are the children all right? They're fine, she said, brushing past me into the apartment. Mom, we need to talk. Seriously. Okay, I replied, closing the door and following her into the living room. Would you like some coffee first? No, thank you. She sat on the sofa, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mom, I've been thinking all night. About you, about the house, about everything. And I realized I need to be honest. I sat down across from her, silent, waiting. I was really counting on the house, she admitted, holding my gaze. Not just as a place where we could live together, but as financial support. I have problems, Mom. Serious problems. What? I asked, stunned. Gabriel had never hinted at financial troubles before. You think I have a good job, a decent salary, and I do, she said bitterly. But I also have huge debts. I'm still paying off student loans. After the divorce, I had to take out a mortgage so the kids and I could have somewhere to live. There are medical bills. Remember when Silas broke his arm? Insurance only covered part of it. Then there are the credit cards. I remembered how she always loved nice things, how even after her divorce she continued traveling, dining out, buying new clothes. It had seemed like resilience, but maybe it was denial. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. I would have helped. Pride, I guess, she said with a shrug. I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle things. And I was counting on the house. I figured, in a few years, I'd inherit it. I'd sell it or refinance it, pay off the debts, and finally get a clean slate. And now, I said, finishing the thought for her, you don't have a house to count on. She nodded, lowering her eyes. Now I don't have anything. The bank is threatening to foreclose if I don't pay the mortgage within a week. I'm afraid we'll end up on the street. A week. I was shocked. Why are you only telling me now? Why wait until the last minute? I hoped I could fix it on my own, she whispered. I looked for a part-time job, tried to restructure the debt, but nothing worked. And then I found out you sold the house, and I panicked. I looked at my daughter, struggling with a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, anger, pity. I was hurt by her admission that she viewed me more as a financial safety net than a mother. Still, the fear in her voice was real. How much do you owe? I finally asked. She named a figure that made me inhale sharply. It was nearly a third of what I'd received from selling the house, after accounting for my apartment and the courses I'd taken. And you thought I would just give you the house? I asked, trying to make sense of her reasoning. You wouldn't give it to me, she said quietly. But you'd leave it to me in your will. Maybe move into a nursing home where someone else could take care of you. I turned away, stunned. Her words felt like a blow, not out of concern, but convenience. My own daughter had considered sending me to a home so she could cash in on my property. It hurt more than I could say. I know it sounds awful, she added. I'm not proud. But I'm desperate. She came to stand beside me at the window, her voice barely a whisper. Please, Mom. I know I made mistakes. I'm not asking for myself, but for Silas and Fallon. They shouldn't have to suffer because of my failures. I looked at her and saw real tears in her eyes. Despite everything, she was still my child. And her children, my grandchildren, were innocent in this. I'll think about it, I said finally. What you've told me, it's a lot to process. I need time. I understand, she nodded, dabbing at her eyes. But please don't take too long. I only have a week. After she left, I sank into a chair, hands trembling. Everything I'd worked to build, my new life, my peace, my independence, now hung in the balance because of her recklessness. Over the next few days, I sought advice. I met with a financial advisor and a lawyer. I discussed everything with Quentin and Vinny. Quentin urged me not to rush. If I chose to help, I should do so with firm boundaries. Vinny, ever pragmatic, was opposed. He believed Abby needed to face the consequences of her choices. On the 6th day, I made my decision. I called Abby and asked her to come over. She arrived an hour later, nervous and anxious. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, once we were seated in the living room. "And I've decided to help, but only under certain conditions." "What conditions?" she asked cautiously. "First," I said, "this won't be a gift. It'll be a loan, with a repayment plan. Small monthly installments, but consistent." She nodded, listening carefully. "Second, you're going to create a full debt repayment plan, with help from my advisor. And you're going to stick to it." "Okay," she said, swallowing hard. "Third, we're opening a college fund for Silas and Fallon. I'll contribute monthly. You will too, whatever you can afford." Gabriel looked stunned. "That's very generous, Mom, but I'm not sure I'll be able to pay you back anytime soon." "That's why we're building a realistic plan," I said firmly. "This isn't just about money. It's about learning to take control, for yourself and for your children." After a long pause, she nodded. "I agree to all of it. Thank you, Mom. I know I haven't earned this." "You're my daughter," I said simply. "You always will be." We arranged to meet with the financial advisor the next day. As she left, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The decision had been hard, but it felt right. I was helping her, but not enabling her. I wasn't giving up my life, I was protecting hers, while maintaining my boundaries. That evening, Quentin called to check in. "I've decided to help her," I told him. "But on my terms. I hope it'll teach her responsibility." "You did the right thing," he said warmly. "And you know what? I'm proud of you." That balance, between supporting family and honoring your own life, isn't easy to strike. His words stayed with me. The next day, Gabriel and I met with the advisor. We signed documents, created a repayment plan, and opened the education fund for the children. Gabriel looked somber but relieved. She had avoided catastrophe, but it had come at the cost of honesty, humility, and accepting discipline. "Thank you, Mom," she said as we left. "You could have turned your back on me. I'll try to be better, for the kids, for you, for me." "I believe in you," I said, hugging her. "And I'll always be here, even if we live in separate houses." That day, we didn't part just as mother and daughter, but as two women who had finally begun to understand each other. Abby had come to see me as more than a mother. She saw me as a person, full and real. And I, in turn, had learned to accept her as she was, flawed, fallible, but still trying. 3 months have passed since I moved into my new apartment in the heart of Belmont. Autumn has arrived in full glory, setting the park ablaze with gold and crimson. From my balcony, I drink in the view, this living mosaic, while sipping my morning coffee and watching the city come alive. Life has settled into a beautiful rhythm. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I continue my photography classes with Heather Oren, deepening my craft. On weekends, I take photo walks with Quentin and fellow enthusiasts. And through it all, I carry with me the quiet, profound realization: sometimes it takes distance to truly see and love those closest to us. The rest of my time I spent decorating my new apartment, meeting with Vinny, reading books, and most importantly, enjoying regular visits from my grandchildren. After that difficult conversation and the financial help I extended to Aubrey, our relationship slowly but surely began to shift. My daughter, who had once been on the verge of losing her home, began to see me in a different light. There was a new respect in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. I was no longer a background figure she could lean on without question. I had become a person in my own right, with boundaries, choices, and strength. The financial advisor I hired helped us develop a comprehensive plan to tackle Aubrey's debt. To her credit, she followed the budget with discipline and had already managed to significantly improve her financial standing. Each month, she transferred a small amount to me toward the loan. It wasn't much, but the gesture symbolized something deeper, a newfound sense of responsibility. As for the remaining proceeds from selling the house, I chose to use them intentionally. A third I invested in reliable, long-term options, guided by the same financial advisor. Another third went into educational accounts for Silas and Fallon, money they could use for college when the time came. The final portion I kept for myself, to support my living expenses and finally chase long-held dreams, including traveling, something I had yearned for my entire life. In early October, I returned from my very first solo trip, a week-long photo tour through New England. Traveling alone had always seemed daunting. I had never ventured far without Garrett or Aubrey, but I found myself in the company of 10 enthusiastic photographers, including Quentin, who had organized the trip, and they turned out to be exactly what I needed. We stayed in quaint roadside motels, woke before dawn to capture misty lakes, and wandered woodland trails to photograph the autumn foliage in all its glory. I came home with hundreds of photos and a completely unexpected sense of confidence. Heather, my photography instructor, looked through my latest work in class and smiled. "You've found your own style," she said. "It's lyrical, calm, filled with light, even in the most ordinary scenes." It was then she suggested I consider a small solo exhibition at the city library, which often hosted local photographers and artists. The idea seemed simultaneously terrifying and thrilling. Me, Meredith Tramble, a 67-year-old widow and retired nurse, putting on an art exhibition? It felt like something out of a fantasy. But Heather was persistent, and Quentin and others from the photo club were enthusiastic. "You have nothing to fear," Quentin said over tea one afternoon. "You've got a wonderful eye and technical skill that many seasoned photographers would envy." "But I'm just a beginner," I protested. "I've only been taking classes for 3 months." "Some people study their whole lives and never achieve what you do naturally," he said with a smile. "Besides, it's not the Metropolitan Museum. It's the city library. A perfect way to share your work and learn from the experience." After much thought, I agreed. Heather helped me choose 20 of my best photographs, and the library offered me a room for a 2-week showing in November. The printing and framing process was more expensive and meticulous than I had expected, but to my surprise, I found the preparation incredibly satisfying. When I mentioned the upcoming exhibition to Aubrey during a visit with the kids, she was visibly surprised, but also supportive. "I can organize a little reception," she offered, her eyes lighting up. "I'll bring champagne and appetizers. One of my colleagues is into photography. Maybe she can write something about it for the local paper." Her enthusiasm touched me deeply. This wasn't the Aubrey I used to know, the one who rarely asked about my hobbies or inner life. This was someone new, someone who wanted to be part of my world and support my passions. "That would be wonderful," I said. "Just don't spend too much. You're still on a tight budget." "Don't worry, Mom," she winked. "I've got connections at a catering company. I'll get a good deal." Even Silas was eager to help. "Grandma, can I hang the artwork with you?" he asked. "I've been reading about how to design an exhibition properly." "Of course," I beamed. "Your help will be invaluable." And Fallon, not to be left out, offered to draw invitations. Her hand-drawn cards, decorated with flowers and cartoon cameras, were so charming I actually used them to invite our closest friends. The opening was set for Friday, November 15th. A week before, I was too excited to sleep. There were final prints to pick up, frames to check, lighting logistics to confirm, and guest lists to finalize. The day before the event, Silas and I spent hours at the library arranging the photographs. He approached the task like a seasoned curator, measuring distances, testing lighting angles, and thoughtfully planning the viewing sequence. "You see, Grandma," he explained while adjusting a frame, "you have to tell a story with the pictures. We start with cityscapes, move into nature scenes, and finish with abstract compositions. That way, the viewer experiences a journey." I watched him with quiet amazement and pride. My introverted grandson, once permanently glued to his phone, had discovered an unexpected passion. At that moment, I realized something profound. Selling the house, painful as it was, had somehow turned out to be a blessing. It had cracked us all open, forced us to see each other more clearly. That evening, Vinny called. "Honey, I just heard some wonderful news," she said breathlessly. "Caroline Williams, the woman who bought your house, is pregnant again. A second child, due in the spring." "How lovely," I said, genuinely touched. "There'll be children's laughter in that house again." "Yes, life goes on," Vinny replied. "Oh, and I've invited 15 people to your exhibition. Our whole book club is coming. I told them you're not only a talented photographer, but a very brave woman, starting over when most people your age complain about their knees." I laughed. "Vinny, you exaggerate. I'm just doing what I love." "That's what courage is, Meredith," she said more seriously. "Following your desires, even when it means going against what others expect of you." Her words stayed with me. Was I brave? Or simply tired of living by other people's rules? Either way, I didn't regret anything. Every morning I woke up filled with curiosity. Isn't that what life is really about, at any age? The morning of the exhibition was crisp and clear. I woke up early, applied a touch of makeup, slipped into a new sea green dress I had bought just for the occasion, and arrived at the library 2 hours early to make sure everything was ready. To my surprise, Aubrey was already there, directing the catering staff as they arranged tables, glasses, and canapes. "Mom, you look amazing," she said, glancing up. "Is that a new dress?" "Yes," I said, twirling. "Too young for me?" "Not at all. It suits you perfectly. By the way, I invited a few of my coworkers. I hope that's okay." "Of course," I smiled. "The more, the merrier." By 5 o'clock, the exhibition was in full swing. The photos hung elegantly on the walls. Tables of snacks and champagne lined the center of the room. A guest book waited at the entrance. Heather gave a lovely opening speech, and the librarian had placed a bright poster in the lobby that read, "The World Through My Lens" by Meredith Tramble. Vinny and her book club arrived first, followed by Quentin, my classmates, Aubrey's co-workers, and curious library-goers. I stood near one of my autumn lake photos, chatting with guests about how it had been taken, when I saw someone unexpected. Dexter, Aubrey's ex-husband and father of my grandchildren. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the divorce. He had aged, his hair now streaked with gray, but he still had the charm he once carried so easily. Standing beside him were Silas and Fallon, proudly showing him the exhibit they had helped bring to life. "Dexter," I said with a warm smile, extending my hand. "What a surprise!" "Meredith, you look beautiful," he said, shaking my hand. "The kids wouldn't stop talking about your exhibition. And I must say, I'm impressed. Your work is wonderful." "Thank you," I said, feeling my cheeks color. "It's just a hobby, but it brings me joy." "It's hobbies like that which make life full," he replied. "Aubrey told me you sold your house and started over. That's a bold move." "Not bold," I said thoughtfully. "Just necessary. Sometimes, to move forward, you have to change everything." He nodded. After our divorce, I did the same. Moved to a new city, started a new job, made more time for the kids. Best decision I ever made. We talked more, catching up on family and sharing memories. I noticed how calm things were between him and Aubrey. No more bitterness, just two parents doing their best. The evening flew by. Heather's speech warmed my heart, and Quentin toasted Belmont's newest star photographer. Vinny led the applause and insisted everyone sign the guest book. Aubrey made sure every glass was filled and no plate was empty. Then, suddenly, Silas stepped to the center of the room. "I'd like to say a few words about my grandmother," he began, his voice steady though his cheeks flushed pink. "To most of you, she's Meredith Tramble, the photographer behind these beautiful images. But to me, she's just Grandma. The one who bakes the best apple pies in the world and lets me stay up late watching TV." Laughter swept through the crowd, and he continued, "But lately I've seen something more. Someone who's not afraid of change, who follows her dreams no matter what. And that inspires me. My grandmother showed me that it's never too late to start something new. Never too late to follow your passion. So here's to Meredith Tramble, photographer, grandmother, and the most amazing woman I know." Everyone raised their glasses. I stood there, overwhelmed with emotion, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Aubrey hugged me tight. "He's right, Mom," she whispered. "You are amazing. And I didn't see it for so long." That night, we had dinner together. Me, Aubrey, Dexter, and the kids, at a small restaurant near the library. As I looked around the table, I realized how much had changed in just a few months. We were closer now. More honest. We had all found our places in a new family dynamic. As we said goodbye, Aubrey took my hand. "I'm glad you sold the house. Not just because you helped me, but because it changed us all. If everything had stayed the same, we'd still be stuck in our old patterns." "I'm glad too," I replied. "Sometimes it takes a big push to see what's been in front of you all along." We hugged, and I felt that old wall between us finally fall away. We were simply mother and daughter again, loving each other for who we truly were, without conditions. On the taxi ride home, I remembered what Vinny had told me months earlier. "Home is the walls, dear. Life is what happens here." She tapped her temple, and "here," she added, pressing her hand to her heart. She was right. My home wasn't on Metork Street anymore. My real home was the life I was finally living. Here and here.